Hi everyone, my name is Trisha Card and I am the clarinet professor at Sam Houston State University. I'm going to help you get started on the excerpts for the ATSSB clarinet etudes. This is year E. This video is going to focus on etude number 24. It's found on page 69 and we are in the key of E flat major. The tempo is quarter note equals 92. We are going to play the last 4 lines of the etude, so we're starting in measure 33 and we're playing to the end. The known errata or mistakes that we want to kind of point out, so in measure 38, the first note is an F sharp and the second note is also an F sharp, so just be sure to keep that octave. And then we are adding a retard through measure 40. All right, so we're going to perform the excerpt. So what I'd like to talk about are the big challenges or concepts that I feel are present in this etude. So we're going to talk about style, articulation, and technique. So for the style of the piece, you notice the excerpt doesn't have any rests. So due to this constant sense of motion, you have this constant sense of really obvious pulse. The majority of the dynamics are fairly strong. I think it leads to a very energetic, deliberate, and slightly aggressive style for the etude. And one of the ways to really help keep this style is to go focus on the airstream. We want to make sure we have a very fast airstream and a really constant airstream. Use those stomach muscles to keep that pressure pushing the air out through the clarinet. You can have a feeling of basically a small crescendo throughout, which will really help with the leading. If you look at the last line, I think that sense of crescendo is really going to help. The very last line has a pretty wide range in terms of notes. So if you start at the top, and the top notes always tend to sound a little bit louder, if we put that nice crescendo from the top to the bottom, that's really going to help balance the high notes and the low notes, and it's going to sound really nice. So the articulation in this etude, there's a good mixture of slurs and tongues. Our goal is to sound the same regardless of articulation. We tend to sound better when we slur than tongue, but one of the things we can help with articulation is to try and stay very legato and to stay as light as we can on the articulated notes. Really try and think of a full value or full length on your tongue notes. This is going to help diminish that tongue noise or a thud, which is so common on clarinet. And it will also help you keep that really energetic style and keep the characteristic sound. If you make sure to repeat through the repeated notes or crescendo through the repeated notes, that's really going to help as well, especially on those throat tone B flats. They don't sound all that great anyhow, so if you really feel like you're leading and you have that nice crescendo, you're going to get a really good sound and a much better articulation on the B flats. If you'll notice, the last line actually incorporates staccato marks. Now, I personally don't change the length of my articulated notes, but you could change maybe the style or the type of articulation that you're using. So when I get to the last line, I try and think a little bit more of like a T syllable tongue, something that's just a little bit more pointed, and that's going to give you a really nice crisp articulation, and it's going to sound nice and deliberate, help with the style, and help to create just a really nice ending to this etude. So if we talk about the technique, the kind of nice thing about the etude is it's all 16th notes. So we don't have to worry about rhythm. It's actually kind of easy to practice because it's all the same. So I highly encourage you to practice a lot with a metronome. Find very short little segments that you're going to work on, isolate those segments, and then find a tempo where you can successfully play the passage. So in other words, we have all the right notes and there is no hesitation. So since the etude is around 92, I'm gonna slow this way down to about 60, and just for our example, I'm gonna take measure 35 and just play it as written, nice and slow. Notice I can play it, it sounds very confident, it sounds secure. So I'm going to keep track of my metronome progress. So 60 is my starting point, and I'm going to work slowly to increase that tempo over a fairly long period of time. We're not in a big hurry, but what we do want to make sure is that anytime you push that tempo up, let's say you start at 60 and then by the end of your practice session you're around 64, write that down so that the next time you come to practice, you will remember you got up to 64. Maybe we're going to bump it back a little bit to 63 for just kind of a nice review, and then we're going to start seeing if we can push it forward a little bit more. One of my favorite ways to really practice on technique is to do some practice methods, or just changing what's really changing the rhythm around. I have 4 different rhythms that I use a lot. I have a 2-note grouping, and then I have a 4-note grouping. So I'm going to stick with 35 just as an example, and I'm going to take the rhythm long, short, long, short, long. So it's uneven or kind of a swing rhythm. Stay slow. Do that several times in a row. Get your metronome going. All right, I can take those couple of measures and flip the rhythm around. So now I'm going to do short, long, short, long, short, long. So those are my 2 rhythms for 2-note groupings. And then I have a 4-note grouping I like to use. So I often start with long, short, short, long. Sorry, long, short, 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 long, short, 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 long. Do that several times. Once that feels really comfortable, flip that around. So our 3 short notes are first and our long note is last. And if you practice with those different rhythms, your muscles are going to get the patterns learned very quickly, and it's going to feel really secure in a much shorter period of time. Let me warn you, measure 37 through 40 octaves are pretty challenging on the clarinet. So this line is going to take you a little bit longer to develop. And what I encourage you is just every time you take your clarinet out, play that line. Whether you're practicing this piece, great, play that line. If you're practicing the slow piece, make sure you play that line. If you're practicing your band music, play that line. Go memorize it. The more you can play it, the more your fingers are really going to understand how those octaves work, and you're just going to have a better success in getting that line to come out. Remember, write down your tempos, use your metronome, and slowly increase your speed. Well, this is a great etude. I think it has a lot of personality, and I really hope you enjoy learning this etude. I encourage you to visit the SHSU Clarinet webpage, where I have performance guides for the entire ATSSB 5-year rotation. So good luck, and I hope you have a great year. Bye.